Let me just give you an example of where people abuse words. I used to have this acquaintance, this friend, and he later turned on my wife, Jessica, and I won't get into the details, but he always used to say, I've got high emotional intelligence. And yet he acted very childishly. He did a lot of stuff like that. And people like to use that to cover up that, oh, I just feel an emotional connection. I have nothing against emotion. But for example, if you're a critic, you have to be intellectual. And here's why. In art, if I touch your intellect, the intellect is related to emotion. If you get something and you really connect with it intellectually, it is going to seep down into that emotion. But if you're going for emotion first, think of tearjerker films. Think of, those 1980s kind of tearjerker films with Shirley MacLaine or something. It's not necessarily going to seep upward. What is emotional, which is the base human, that's the reptilian id, isn't necessarily going to go upward. But if you 2001 is a very emotional film. When I first saw it, when I was 11 years old, I cried when Hal is being lobotomized. Even though Hal is a killer, Hal is seemingly a sentient being. When they're pulling that out, I cried for Hal. People who would say that that's a sterile, cold film, what the fuck are they talking about? Again, it's not Kubrick's fault. It's the viewers who don't get it.
Can we, before we conclude the interview, I want to talk a bit about total immersion. Yeah, sure. Because I feel like this is, when I read a lot of contemporary literature, or even literature just done in the last, say, 20 years, like, David Foster Wallace or whatever, or not even him, people like Mark Danielewski, other kind of pomo authors, it is a kind of almost that abstract expressionist tendency of taking different stylistic gestures and refining everything down to like the deploying of those gestures being like different tropes plucked out of other fiction and forced to like just basically assemblage together, forced to kind of commingle. But in your work, there is an expanding outwards. Now, I think I said to someone else, this might be a paraphrase, that it's almost like Dan Schneider is like the little fictive god of his universe, and he's trying to like draw in reality to almost completely devour reality within the stories. It's almost like Danny Wagner won't be happy until his life is almost replaced by fiction, which isn't a comment on Dan Schneider, but the thrust of like these stories seems to be just this outward history, the cosmos, and then into people. It's this very dynamic art. And like, could you talk more about total immersion? And like, do you feel like there is a kind of a demiurge needed, a kind of maybe a megalomanic thing, a kind of a need to sort of create this world? Maybe I'm sort of...
Well, I am the demiurge. I don't believe that you divine inspiration. I did one of my earliest books. It's called the divine inspiration fallacy. There is something about me that feels a desire to create, and like I said, I feel a responsibility to create, because I could write nothing. I could write books about how I suffer at work. Some of my plays use very mundane moments that happen to me. If you were to read all my books and my plays, you would find many incidents in all of them things that are really happened. Total immersion is to put you in there so that for example, have real conversations that go circular. If you've ever noticed, when men sit with each other and talk, they usually sit like they're at a sporting event, side by side, and they're looking off into the ether. Women look eye to eye. Oh, girl, I get you. I get you. Tell me about that bad man. Men are like, she had the fucking tightest pussy I ever fucked. Now, that's just the way that it is. This is something I noticed as a child, the way that most men look at. Because men, when they look at each other, there's the testosterone thing. And there's the dick waving thing. Women don't have that. And this is why women tend to be closer emotionally with each other than men are. Tend to. Not always, but tend to. And so total immersion is to give you that conversational thing. some of the scenes with Big Frank, when Paulie, for example, shoots the kid over which is better, Oreos or High Drops.
Yeah.
There, there's the scene where he's just killed someone. He's murdered someone in cold blood, and Vito Vincetti comes in and he starts eating some of the cookies and spills some of the crumbs on the corpse. And Paulie is outraged. He's like, he's a dead man. You can't do that. And he just murdered someone, and yet he's upbraiding his thug killer assistant there for not having respect. This gives you a real sense of who these people are, so that you are in there. You get in so much. For example, remember Carla Maravelli has the lover named Silver, and she kills off one of her girlfriends, her rivals.
Is that the ad exec dude?
Roger Silver, who's based on the Mad Men character Roger Sterling. So Sterling Silver, and so, but then she disappears for about 1.5 million words. Only 2 years have passed chronologically. The book is set from 60 to 68. She disappears from like 64 to 66. She comes back. We know her backstory. It's burned. She's so well described there that when she comes back, Paulie and her are so well described that we know how they're going to interact to a certain degree. We know how they're going to clash. Everything that happens, in a sense, feels like it's predicted, but it's not, because we know her so well. And when she comes back after the Bit von Rheingold incident, and one of the reasons for that is to let all of that reality, that total immersion, compacted it. There's a theory about memory that one of the things is you experience it, it's so vivid, then you go away from it, and then when you come back, it will have compacted. Your mind will have compressed it. One of the things that happens interestingly in art is if you read especially long books, and this happened when I read Proust. It happened when I read. It happened when I saw Satan Tango, the film by Bellatar. When I remember it, since there's only like 12 to 15 scenes, my memory says it's a much shorter film, but the images are so primal. The things. And that was one of the big influences on this, a film like Satan Tango. And so when Carla comes back, we know her, and we almost have her memories with us coming back to us. There's the really funny scene where Tony Lutz, another dumbass killer, is being contracted by Carla to kill Paulie, and when she turns him down, he tries to pick her up. It's a great pathological moment. Because Tony Luft,
something he would definitely do, Tony
and
Luft.
We know Tony Luft is a pathetic loser who watches these Christmas cartoons every year and has this fantasy about meeting this 1930s movie star named Buster Crabbe. Tony Luft, we know from the Vincetti brothers, if we read that, we know that he's so stupid that when he's trying to kill Gino Vincetti, his head is too big. He's hiding behind trees that are too small to hide him. There's something wrong.
He's great.
There's something wrong with this person, but these characters are so well sketched out, usually between what they see rather than their physical description, because we know what is important to these characters, that when they come together, we feel like we're there. We remember the things that they remember. We remember the orgone box that Paulie wants to go and eat 2 million words later.
Yeah, I like him. I mean, that's one of the things I remember so clearly about a bloody Wilhelm Reich orgone box. It's so him. It's so his character, and another character who I feel is like that is I forget her name, but I really shouldn't. The aunt from your play of God Run Live. Yeah. She feels I've met her. I feel like I've met that woman, and I feel like the kind of. When I remember, I get that kind of cringe, oh my God, like that I get with relatives I really know and I really dislike. And it's like, but
these people, they're well described, but they're not stereotypes. It's easy to say that someone like Bit von Rheingold, he's not. Where else are you going to meet, a shit-loving Jewish pornographer pervert?
No, anyone else wouldn't touch it because it's like, that's ugly.
And you said that. Before I wrote this book, or actually before I wrote Bit of Golem, the book, I contacted the Little People of America, which is the dwarf organization here in America. And I told them that, could I interview some of the people, could you put it out that I'd like to interview someone to get the dwarf? My idea was to have Bit and talk about his dwarfism. And I'm like, well, that would be kind of boring. I mean, let's make him a real human being who just happens to be a dwarf.
Yeah.
You are a real human being that just happens to be gay. Other people are a human being that just happen to be this ethnicity. You know,
and he tells people, "I'm a dwarf, not a midget." That's like, right. that's so I wondered whether that was something
he says he's a midget, not a dwarf. He wants to be known as a midget because a dwarf is a magical being.
Yes, yes. And I remember reading that going like, that's something that like either I mean, I couldn't figure out whether you had heard this from a friend who had dwarfism or read it somewhere or not. I think not being able to tell is really good, but it makes so much sense. And I would even now I tell people, you know, isn't it a bit embarrassing to call them dwarves? Aren't they like from folklore? I mean, isn't midget really the more dignified thing? Yeah, total immersion. I feel like it is. You need those characters, and you need that kind of intensity, that kind of interest in the characters, and a sensitivity to the characters. I mean, I said before that they're grotesque, but you're really